So thanks everybody for joining today.
There we go.
What I want to do is basically start the presentation today by saying that we're currently navigating a stigmatized landscape, and that's really become our new normal today. If you think about it, with the degree of polarization that's happening, not just in but practically around the world, there are a lot of issues that are currently like surfacing to the top, right? So things like these headlines that came up, in the newspaper in the last, 2 to 3 weeks, are just a reflection of what's going on, basically. Can you guys hear me? Hello?
Yes, fine.
Okay, good. Sorry,
Yes.
For some reason I thought I lost the connection. So with these kinds of headlines going on, what do we do? So, and what is stigma all about, really? So stigma is basically, if you were to get a definition for stigma, it's basically a mark of disgrace associated with a particular circumstance, quality, or person, right? But people throw the word stigma around all over the place. But how do you kind of like diagnose it? How do you kind of like figure out what kind of stigma are you really talking about? So I kind of like went into the mental health space, which is where you typically think about stigma, right? And there are 7 different ways you can actually define stigma, from self-stigma, perceived stigma, public stigma, etc., right? So the reason why I like having this kind of definition broken down into these 7 different components is that any brand that's dealing with stigma, right, you have to think of it in the context of, it's not just one kind of stigma you're dealing with. It may be layered. It may be multiple versions of this happening to your brand, to your consumers, to your customers, whatever the case may be. So to diagnose the problem, you have to kind of almost, make sure that you're understanding exactly what the issue is before you go and actually solve for the problem. Now, I'm going to go back into time a little bit. In 1998, I was living in London, and the one thing that was the rage in London at the time was the Spice Girls. But I'm not going to talk about the Spice Girls because they don't actually have a stigma associated with them. But the brand that does have stigma associated with it is actually Old Spice. Do you see the connection? Spice Girls, Old Spice. It was a big thing back then. So what actually was going on with Old Spice? We were doing research in London, and there was this one teenage boy that gave the perfect explanation for how they were viewing Old Spice. He described Old Spice as Nelson's column. So if you've ever been to London, there's this big statue of Lord Nelson in the middle of Trafalgar Square, and it's a great popular tourist destination. And the way he described it basically is that if you go to Lord Nelson's column, there's a lot of pigeon shit on him, right? And that for them was an explanation of how they viewed Old Spice, an iconic brand, but very old-fashioned, and was just out of and not part of the times any longer. Their grandparents used it, for the aftershave lotion, but that was about it. So when you kind of like tried to break down the stigma, there were really like 3 different layers of stigma that were happening. 98, I didn't even know any of this stuff. So there was perceived stigma, which is how people were viewing the brand. There was stigma by association. In other words, if I use the brand, how would I be perceived by my friends if they found out that I was using Old Spice? And for those, because of that issue, there was label avoidance. In other words, I wouldn't even buy the brand because I was worried about how I would be perceived if I use the brand, right? So if that was the case, how did the brand actually start turning around? So initially what they had done was the Old Spice brand actually launched a campaign called 1-800-PROVE-IT. Let me see if this actually works. And you can hear
It sounds crazy, but yeah, I took the high endurance challenge from Old Spice because I didn't really think it could work better than my old deodorant, but it does. It evaporates less quickly. It also lasts longer, protects better. Try it. If you don't think it's the best, call 1-800-PROVE-IT and they'll buy you a stick of yours. So if you still think every deodorant works the same, take the high endurance challenge from Old Spice, because now you got proof, guaranteed.
So this copy that was launched in the US back in the 90s did help build the business. And in fact, it moved people's perceptions of the brand from being really negative to about neutral. But what made the brand really grow was the next piece of copy. I think you guys probably know this one.
Hello, ladies. Look at your man. Now back to me. Now back at your man. Now back to me. Sadly, he isn't me. But using lady scented body wash and switch to Old Spice, he could smell like he's me. Look down. Back up. Where are you? You're on a boat with the man your man could smell it. What's in your hand? Back at me. I have it. It's an oyster with 2 tickets. That thing. Look again. And now Diamond. Anything is possible when your man smells like Old Spice and not a lady. I'm on a horse.
So the fascinating thing about these two pieces of copy, and the reason why I brought them up, is back in 1998, when we were in London and we were doing all this research, we found the insight about the fact that women were disproportionately buying males, for their spouses or their husbands or their boyfriends, deodorants and body washes. We didn't do anything back in 1998, but 2010, when we launched the second campaign, the brand took off like gangbusters because we were basically converting an issue of, it's not a brand that I would use into something that was truly something that people wanted to have, because the women were the ones influencing the man to go and actually use the bottle, basically. And here's a quote that was there, which is, one of the best ads ever made, should get an Oscar, blah, 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 right? And if you think it was just a quote, look at the results that they got. Oops. Here we go. It became the most viewed channel at the time on YouTube. It saw a 27% increase in 6 months after launching this campaign. And Old Spice actually became the #1 male body wash back in 2010. And it's, by the way, is still #1 in the US as a body wash, right? So here's an example, a simple example of if you are facing these kinds of stigmas that were there, it took a long time to overcome them, but it wasn't just talking about it from a rational perspective. You also had to appeal to the emotional side of it as well. And that is the big, big shift that I actually have had in my career, intellectual versus emotional, and the role that plays in overcoming stigma. So with all that said, what's our role as insights professionals at the end of the day? We have a role to play in overcoming stigma. And because of that, we have a role to play in diversity, equity, and inclusion, not just for your employees, but also for your consumers and for your customers as well, right? So I'm going to leave you with that thought. I know we don't have a lot of time today. This coming Friday, there's another longer session that's happening where I'll go through a longer presentation on this very topic if you're interested. But in the meantime, if you want to connect with me, feel free to pull out your smartphone and just use your camera and point it towards the QR code. That'll take you to my LinkedIn profile. If you want to follow my business page, which is Y2S Consulting, I have a newsletter started called In Search of Normal. I've done 3 blog posts already. If you're interested in following, more conversations around stigma, you're welcome to do that. And with that said, here's the, can you come up with 3 brands that have to address stigma? So at the end of your breakout session, please type in the 3 brands into the chat function, and that would be pretty much your assignment. So with that, thank you very much. I hope you found this interesting, and looking forward to connecting with everyone.